Hello everyone and welcome to 4 tips about rubrics in project-based learning in an elementary classroom. Today's video is getting posted on YouTube. I'm really excited to post it there and then post the link on the elementary project-based learning page. We're going to see how this goes in terms of uploading videos and then putting the links for people to watch. I'm really excited about this process and I'm really excited to talk to you about 4 tips for rubrics in project-based learning in an elementary classroom. If you don't know who I am, my name is Ruth Ann Lane and I am a certified project-based learning teacher. I also have certifications in elementary education, K-6, and reading K-6. So I'm really excited to talk with you today. I've done project-based learning in a primary grade and in an intermediate grade, both for multiple years. Okay, so 4 tips for rubrics and project-based learning. Rubrics are a really big part of project-based learning. If you've done any kind of training for project-based learning or any kind of reading on project-based learning, you've probably seen rubrics mentioned quite a bit. It's one of the things that is very commonly discussed for project-based learning. But one disclaimer that I do want to say before I dive into this is a lot of times project-based learning, when it first got started, was used a lot in high school and middle school. So rubrics were a great way of assessing a PBL unit, because in those grades, most of the teachers implementing it were doing one content area. So when PBL started to become more popular in elementary grades, the idea of rubrics filtered down, but it looks very different in elementary than it does in high school and middle school, because in elementary we teach multiple content areas. So instead of having like a biology teacher, most elementary teachers teach biology and ELA at its very base form. So when I'm talking with you today, I'm going to let you know kind of what I learned, because when I went to a PBL training, it was by a lot of teachers who had just started in PBL, and it was right when PBL was, first starting to become really big, and rubrics were part of the process. So my first tip is not to reinvent the wheel, or reinvent the rubric. Nudge, nudge, nudge. So when I talk about not reinventing the rubric, what I mean by that is if you are doing standard-based grading, standard-based grading came along after a lot of these trainings and books and things were written. So it's not something that was really accounted for a lot with elementary project-based learning specifically. If you're doing standard-based grading, you do not need to do another rubric for your content area. You just use your standard-based grading rubric, and then that, sorry, you can hear my kids in the background, that is what you would use to assess the standards that your students are mastering through their PBL unit. You can also create a rubric for presentation skills or for your 21st century skills, and then assess those separately from your standard-based content grades, if that's what you choose to do. I think that if you're going to create a rubric, try to do it in a way that is very similar to standard-based grading, so that you can use that same rubric in any PBL unit for years to come, because it's going to assess that same content. So what do I mean by that? When you write your rubric, instead of focusing on how you want that presentation to look, and how you want that presentation to display that content, focus on the content itself. So if you have your students creating a slideshow to inform others about the environment, instead of talking about main idea and how it's going to be represented in that presentation, breaking down main idea into the content that you want them to see. So if you want them to have a main idea sentence on a slide, to write that the main idea sentence is detailed and covers the main topic and specific main idea of the text, instead of saying that the main idea of the text is worded on the first slide in X number of words. So instead of focusing on what you want them to do in the presentation, in that, focusing on the actual content. And then when you do your 21st century rubric sections, that's where you can focus on how you want them to present the information. Because when you're assessing that content standard, how they present it is not as important as whether or not they actually know it. And you want to be able to take that same rubric that you worked so hard on and take that same row and apply it to a different project later, because then you're saving yourself work, and you don't want to have to do more work because PBL can already be kind of involved. So try to make sure that if you have to write a rubric, you're thinking about the content and assessing that content in multiple projects. Okay, that's my number one. Don't reinvent the rubric. Number two is something that I did a lot in the very beginning of PBL. On my very first year of PBL, I did this a lot. What I did was I took my rubric, I put all the content areas into one rubric with presentation skills at the bottom, and then I graded the project, and I took that project rubric and I put it into all of the grades that had content areas. So, you know, if the whole rubric tallied up to be 50 and they got a 45 out of 50, then by golly, they got a 45 out of 50 in math and a 45 out of 50 in ELA and a 45 out of 50 in science. Now, for some of you, you're probably sitting there going, that's terrible. For some of you, you're probably sitting there going, oh, I do that. So let me tell you why I stopped doing that and my reasoning for it, and then you can decide if that's something you want to continue doing or not. I began to become more informed about standard-based grading after my first year and of PBL, and I realized that by doing that, by putting all of the content area into one rubric and applying that grade across multiple content areas, I was actually inflating or deflating student grades not based on their knowledge in that topic. So let me explain. All of us have areas of weakness, right? For me, math is something that as a student I struggled with a lot, but by golly, my reading grade was just usually very good. So my math grades were always a little bit lower than my reading grades. What happens when you have a project like that and you take that score is if my rubric has multiple reading standards in it and I aced those, but you know, there was maybe one line for a math part and I maybe did okay in that, but I got a 45 out of 50 on my project. Now I've inflated my reading grade or my math grade by using reading standards to show a math grade. And I think that that's something that's really an important thing to do. So what do you do to remedy that instead? What I stopped doing was I stopped taking a full grade for that. What I started doing was putting the content rows by section totals. So if I had 3 standards for ELA that I was covering, I put them in and then put the total below. So if it was, you know, each section totaled up to be 5 and it was out of 15, then it was out of 15 for ELA. And then it was out of, if 2 rows, maybe it was out of 20 for math. And I made each section worth its own grade so that when I was putting it into my grade book, I wasn't inflating a grade by taking content areas that didn't have anything to do with the content area that they were getting the grade for. And then we switched to standard-based grading, and it didn't matter anyway because I was using those rubrics. But just a word from someone who used to do that. I also stopped putting my presentation grades in anywhere. So that was another thing. You know, you can have a student who is a really good presenter but still doesn't know a lick of anything to do with multiplication that they were supposed to show me in a PBL. What I would do with that would be to inform parents or get together with your school if you have a school that is pursuing PBL and talk about the need for a 21st century skills rubric or a grading system that goes home with every report card, and use that to help you assess 21st century skills in your classroom. If you don't have that, then maybe you add it to your report card. Talk with your admin about I'd like to send home a 21st century skills report card in my report card envelopes every 6 weeks, and then that way I'm assessing their 21st century skills through my project-based learning. I'm sure that you can find some of those online. If that's something that you're interested in me finding for you or looking for you, I'd be happy to do that. Just leave a comment below and I will see if I can't find something like that for you and send it to you. Or if I can't find something, maybe I'll create it. Okay, that is number 2. So trying to avoid inflating or deflating grades by using all of the content areas in one rubric. Okay, number 3 is only to use a rubric if it's the best means to obtain a grade for that content area. Like I said earlier, when PBL first got going, it was mostly in older grades where teachers were teaching one content area. So as elementary educators, we have to kind of keep that in mind when we're doing PBL, that sometimes rubrics are not the best way to assess our students. And you're a professional, you know what the best way is to assess your students. You know, maybe I use that rubric in a small group, or maybe instead of using a rubric, this is one of those assessments where I need to do a paper pencil test. They happen. There are content areas where sometimes I just have to do a paper pencil test. If that's the case, then don't be afraid to do that. I do think that the 21st century skills are best assessed through a rubric, but sometimes some of your content area, you just need to see it on a paper pencil test. You just need to see it in a certain form that isn't gradable through a rubric, and that's fine. It's okay to do that in elementary grades specifically. I think that's an important distinction that doesn't get talked about a lot because rubrics are pushed so hard in PBL. But sometimes we just need to do a form of assessment that doesn't involve a rubric. And so as a professional, you can certainly discern between what is a good way to assess via rubric or what is a good way to assess via another means of assessment. So just use your professional judgment there, I would say. You know, definitely try to use those rubrics for 21st century skills because I do think that those are the best way to assess that. But in terms of some of your other content areas, if a rubric doesn't assess it well, then don't use a rubric. Okay, my 4th and final tip for rubrics in a PBL classroom is transparency. Transparency, transparency, transparency. This is my biggest tip for rubrics. I did this every time that I implemented a rubric, both in my 5th grade classroom and my 1st grade classroom. The second that I created a rubric that was going to go along with our PBL unit, I sat my students down, I gave every kid a copy, I sent a copy home, and I walked my kids through that language on the rubric. I talked with them about what those verbs meant. I talked with them about what my language specifically meant for every category. I asked them if they had questions. I posted the rubric up on the wall so students knew exactly how they were being graded. There was no mystery about it. This is how I'm going to grade you. That way, during lessons and during my interactions with them, I could always point back to that. Well, let's see. You know, this content has to be graded by me seeing these specific examples. Does your presentation show me those specific examples? Do you have 3 key details that support that main idea? Let's talk about it. Let's work it backwards together. If the students didn't have those things, they knew that they had to have it in order to attain a 4, or they had to have it in order to attain a 3. So this is a really important part of rubrics in a PBL, and you can do this in an elementary classroom, and you can do this in a 1st grade classroom because I did it. It's very important to have that transparency with your students so they don't feel like they worked so hard on this presentation and then they got graded not knowing how they were going to be graded. I really strongly believe in anchor examples too. I think that for a 1st grade classroom or a 5th grade classroom or a 6th grade classroom, if you do standard-based grading and you have that 1, 2, 3, 4 scale, showing an example of what a 1 looks like, showing showing an example of what a 2 looks like, showing an example of a 3, and showing an example of what a 4 could look like. We know that 4s are often kind of left up to some interpretation, but I do believe that you can show an example of what one could look like. You can do this without guiding them. You can show them one example through a PowerPoint, and then for that same rubric, you can show them another example in a, I don't know, in a shoebox diorama. Take pictures every year of your 4s, your 3s, your 2s, your 1s, and use them the following year. Do not use them the same year, especially for those 1s, but use them the following year so students can see, oh, okay, yeah, I don't want to do that. Oh, okay, I need to be more detailed here. I think examples are the most powerful way that you can show your students how they can display content, how they can show you what it is they know. I also am a big fan of asking student permission to show their work as an example. If you have a group that's working really hard on a presentation to show, I don't know, to show how statistics are used, like surveys, and they have a great survey question where they kept their data very organized in a great way, showing that, talking with them, saying, hey guys, you already reached a 3 just looking at this, because looking at our rubric, this is a 3. You've already reached a 3. Do you mind if I slap this under the doc cam and show it to everyone so that they can kind of see what a 3 looks like? Oh, okay, yeah. Most of the time the kids are going to tell you, yes, we would love for you to do that, because who doesn't love to be bragged about by their teacher? So you put it under the doc cam and you say, hey guys, group 4 who's working on the statistics part with their survey, look at this awesome survey, look at how nicely they organize this data. Guys, if you want to get a 3, you need to be able to organize this data the same way. Look at how neat and organized it is. Just showing examples as you're going too. And once a student reaches that 3, inform them, tell them, hey guys, this is definitely going to be a 3. If you want to take it to a 4 and you want to take it to that next level, then let's go look at the rubric and look at what you can do on your example to get it to that next level. Really just making that rubric driving kind of what it is that they're doing, so that they're focusing on that content as they're doing their creation to go along with the PBL. Okay guys, that is my 4 examples, my 4 tips for rubrics. I feel like rubrics are something that I'm really passionate about in PBL, so if there's anything that you have questions about, or if there is a specific content area that you would like help creating a rubric for, feel free to drop me a comment below and I would be happy to help you do that. Or you can private message me and we can definitely talk about that. Alright guys, I hope you have a great day. Thank you for bearing with me as I upload this video. I'm hoping to get it done before midnight tonight so that it's still on Sunday, but if not, that's okay too. I will see you next Sunday. I'm going to post a poll tomorrow over a new topic. I may do a live or I may do a video. I'm thinking that I'm just going to do a video like this and then start uploading them onto YouTube, and then posting them on our elementary project-based learning page. All right, guys, have a great day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.